Y'all hear me? Hello? This is Raven here. Ready to get started? So, welcome back everybody. It is Monday night, and you know what that means. It is a reading stream. Very happy to be here with you guys again. Was just getting done watching Havoc stream. He's still going right now, so if y'all are looking for a gaming stream that you'd rather watch tonight, I totally understand. Havoc is streaming right now, so you can check that out. But if you'd rather join me for some more storytelling, I'd be happy to have you along. For those of you who are new, welcome. I doubt I have any new folks here tonight, but if this is your first time here, this is the Raven's Roost. All I do is I read stories to you guys and just chat, because Mondays are rough, Mondays are exhausting, and I like to kick back on a Monday night and just read stories. So tonight we are going to read some of my stories. We've been in the middle of reading a couple of stories, and we're going to continue them tonight. Now, I do have some bad news. Many of you, apparently according to this poll, let's go ahead and end it now. According to this poll, it looks like, okay, the Priceless, the Star Wars story, and the Tale of Tomiki have tied with 40%. Well, this is going to be very sad news. Priceless, this chapter of Priceless we're going to read tonight is the last chapter I have written. Priceless did not get a lot of attention when I published it, and so because I don't write as much when there is so little attention, I didn't give it a lot more work than I have now. So unfortunately, this is the last chapter I have of Priceless until I write any more of it. So with that in mind, I will read this chapter to you guys, and if you would like to see more of Priceless, let me know, and we'll see what we can do. But unfortunately, I have to write stories that my audience is invested in. And it's a funny thing. I want to talk about this before we start reading. A lot of people like to say, Raven, you should write what you enjoy. You should write what you like. And that's a very difficult piece of advice for me to follow, because if I didn't enjoy the stories I was writing, I wouldn't write them. All the stories that I put my time and energy into are ones that I enjoy writing. I have tons of ideas that come to my head all the time, and I want to write them all. I want to write all of these stories. But since my time is limited, I can only devote time to stories that I know people are going to enjoy. I'm a people pleaser. I like to make other people happy. I like to entertain other people. And so when people say, just write what you want to write, my response is, well, what do you want to read? You know? So I have to go where the entertainment is. That's why I open each of these streams with a poll where I ask, what are you most excited for? Because I want to know what stories you are most invested in. So that is why Priceless only has 5 chapters right now. I'd love to write more, but until it gets more attention, I just can't. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started then, shall we? We'll start with Priceless tonight. We are on Chapter 5 of Priceless, written May 24th, 2023. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. Hut strongholds and throne rooms can vary across Hut space. Hut clan leaders value opulence and wealth. They enjoy flaunting their power, their influence, and their rank. They love having audiences that surround them, party guests and servants who will praise them, beg for favors, and do work for them. So despite how different some throne rooms might look, after a while you'll notice distinct similarities in the clientele and pastimes of Huts. And Krosh was no different. Krosh basked in his large circular room. Enormous windows behind him cast an ambient light through, silhouetting him on his cushioned throne. Powerful Huts rarely had to bother themselves with actually moving. They liked to sit on hover platforms or sliding beds, so Krosh had not left his throne platform in a very long time. He had a pipe in his wide mouth, and his sickly green skin dripped with a thin coat of grime. His big eyes were orange and cold as they observed the slave girls dancing for him in the presence of his crowd. He licked his lips in lustful pleasure, and his tail tapped, slapping the medical slab he rested on. The patrons surrounding the walls all whistled and howled and hooted at the assortment of women before them. They were all a bit different. A human, 2 Twi'leks, a Togruta, a Nautolan, and even a Zabrak. They were all clad in little clothing, showing ample skin and veils covering their faces, moving in sensual and pleasing ways. Their hair or tendrils waving and bouncing as they moved. He'd missed this a lot. 3 weeks ago, he'd gotten the report about a security breach and the attack on the guard station, and his head of security had advised he not invite any visitors or guests into his home until the matter had been resolved. The wait to have entertainment had been unbearable, so when he finally had gotten the ability to invite people into his presence again, he took to it with a will, gathering his favorite faces and voices to join him and, of course, his slave dancers. His security team hadn't liked it, but he could care less. What was the point in having power if you couldn't flaunt it a bit? "My Lord Crosh," a guard near the window whispered. She was one of his security squad that was standing near the window. He didn't recognize her voice. Perhaps she was new. It didn't matter to him. He turned to glare at the guard. "What is it?" he belched. "It's getting late," she muttered, "and we have a report that we're going to expect some heavy seismic activity near the city tonight. Perhaps it would be best to send the guests home now." "It's fine," Cross snarled at her. "But, sir," the guard continued, "we also have reports of unrest at the slave quarter. Some of the slaves seem to be rioting." "That's hardly a problem," Cross snarled. "Call security and get them to deal with it. I'm having fun right now, so leave me be." "But, sir, it would be far more wise to—" Cross snapped his head around to glare at the officer, and the music and dancing stopped. "You dare to question my wisdom, my decisions, my actions?" Cross bellowed, reaching out a stubby hand to grab the officer by the collar. He couldn't see her face through the helmet visor, but she seemed to have gone rigid. "I am Crosh, the highest lord of the Huts, the greatest of the Angeliac Khadidic. I rule you. I am sovereign." Sir, I'm sorry. I was only looking out for your safe—" "I will decide what is in my best interest," Cross roared. "Speak once more, and I'll have you killed. Do you hear me?" Fearful to answer, the soldier nodded his head. Cross let him go and turned his attention back to the dancers and musicians. He looked among them and clapped his hands. "Resume the party." The interruption was discarded, and the girls went back to their pornographic performance. As they danced, they drew closer to Crosh, particularly the veiled Nautilon, whose performance was nothing short of enthralling. He smiled as she came up to him, and he brought his slimy hands up to touch her waist. "What is your name, beautiful?" he asked. The veiled girl just shivered. Now, don't be scared. I'm not that dangerous. What do you call yourself?" he asked. "Leah," the girl answered smoothly. "Leah, lovely," Crosh hissed. "Now, won't you say my name?" he whispered. "Say my name to me, nice and slow." Leah leaned close, inhaling the hut scent and fighting back the urge to retch. He reeked way worse than Garrick ever had. "What's my name?" Suddenly the room was plunged into darkness and he gasped. The girl jumped off of him in a panic and looked around disoriented. The guards pulled their guns and the guests screamed and ran around in terror. "What's happening?" he bellowed. "Something's cut the power," a guard shouted. "We're working to restore it." "I think it's an assassin," another guard called. Cross felt fear grip him. This was all a setup. Who was responsible? And how were they going to get him? He was safe here. Wait, no, he wasn't. The guests, any one of them could be the assassin. And if the assassin was the same person who had hit the security hub, then they would know his location. They certainly knew how to kill the power. His entire room was in a panic. His guests and VIPs were now scrambling over each other to get away, but the confused guards outside were struggling to hold them back, or at least stem the tide. It was no use, though. They were all fleeing as fast as they could. The dancer girls that he could see were cowering and screaming, holding each other and trying to join the escaping guests to get outside. His whole throne room was in disarray. And worse yet, there was something distinctly wrong. Cross could feel the faintest vibrations beneath him. The seismic movement that had been predicted was coming. DU was still a young planet. Occasional volcanic and seismic activity was not uncommon, and the city was more than able to endure, but the quakes and lava eruptions could be dangerous to passerby who were unprepared. It was wise to be in a safe and secure place until the movement passed, especially now. We must make it to my security bunker at once," he cried. The guard from earlier that had spoken up went to his radio fast, fumbling with it, while Cross activated his hover platform to carry him to the escape lift. "Sir," the guard squeaked, fearful of the consequence, "I'm being told the path to the bunker is Dangerous at this time.
It's what?
The slave revolt is getting out of hand. Apparently the slaves were able to remove their slave collars and have started stealing weapons. It's turned into a riot, he cried. Cross's green skin turned sicker and more pale than before.
The slaves are free? Like hell they are, he shouted.
I'm getting confirmation now, another guard agreed, listening to his radio and shaking his helmeted head. Sorry, it's true, sir. The riot squads can't contain it.
Where's Sigeth? He's supposed to be in charge of this riffraff,
Cross bellowed. We can't reach him. He's either dead or perhaps hiding, the guard answered.
To hell with it, Cross roared. I'm leaving. Where's my shuttle?
Docking Bay 2, another guard answered.
Stay near me. We're getting off DU right now, Cross snapped. My safety is your top priority.
With a nod, the armed escort ran forward to lead him out of his stronghold and out towards the docking area. How had it all gone so wrong so quickly? What was this about? Cross couldn't figure it out. Who was behind this attack? Cross felt something very wrong in this. Something beyond mere grudges. But he pushed those thoughts from his mind and moved the platform along with his escort. The smoke filled the sky was getting thicker, and the magma below the city was growling and simmering furiously. There would be an eruption soon. The plasma shields beneath the city would protect the structure, but being outside could still be a threat, not to mention the smoke itself was noxious if inhaled for too long. The guards had moved quickly to start getting to the ship, and the hover platform that Cross sat on was crawling behind them. He'd never had to move it this fast and this far before, and he didn't like it. DU was a detestable fireball. Its value as a mining and refining planet was the only reason he'd invested in it, and while it had turned him a profit, he hated living here. But it was safe here, too. A city floating above a molten world prevented land assaults, and threats of destroying the mining city itself deterred orbital strikes or air assaults. The location, while unpleasant, was tactical, which only infuriated Cross even more, the feeling of unsafeness now, after all this time.
Where's the ship?
At the end of the platform, a guard responded.
What's the newest information from the slave quarter?
Cross demanded. Chaos, sir, another answered. The slaves are storming the city and looting. We need to get you out of here and appeal to the Angeliac to help you stop this madness.
As if my useless brothers and sisters would ever seek to aid me without compensation. And I'm sure they'll kill most of the slaves. A terrible waste of property and money, Cross snarled. But there's nothing for it. Go get the engine started. We have to be beyond the city before this eruption. As two guards ran forward to reach the ship, as if in preparation, there was a sudden deafening explosion. The two guards, as well as the entire escape ship, were swallowed in a tremendous fireball. Cross cried out in horror, and the remaining guards raised their blasters to see what had done the deed. What happened? The ship!
My lord, we need to... Before he could finish, the guard speaking suddenly felt the heat of a blaster bolt shattering his helmet and sending him sprawling to the ground. The three remaining guards rounded at the sound, only for more volleys to take them down before they could return fire. Unable to find any cover to take, they were easy prey for the new threat. After several exchanges of fire, all that was left was Cross and this new enemy. He turned his platform to see, and what he saw made his already rather wide eyes boggle. Dressed in the garb of one of his slave dancers, a veil over her face and long tendrils snaking down from her head, it was the Nautilon dancer girl he'd been playing with not an hour earlier. Leah. Her cold eyes bore into him as she lowered her blaster, her bare feet careful with every step. Seeing the blaster put away, Cross tried to relax a little.
I take it you're an assassin?
He asked. Bounty hunter, actually, Leah Tai answered.
A bounty hunter, Cross said, surprised. And here I took you for a sexy dancer. You really are quite talented.
In his experience, it never hurt to suck up to those who had power over him, and right now Leah had the power. The eruptions were getting more ominous. They had minutes before the lava began to reach their height.
Listen, you might be new to DU, but we're about to experience a significant eruption. It would be dangerous for us to stay here. I won't listen. I won't resist. I'll come quietly. Then once we're safely away, we can negotiate a new price. I'll double whatever you're being paid to take me.
Leah stared at him a moment, the silk fabric of her outfit blowing in the smoggy wind.
Come now, it's obvious you're not here to kill me. Otherwise you wouldn't have put away your blaster. So let's just get out of here. We'll work together on this. The Angelia could use someone as clever and resourceful as you.
Leah finally walked towards him and knelt down at the base of his platform to look at the hover controls. She then pressed her finger to her earpiece. Niner, she said, I need you here. Krosh looked confused.
What are you doing?
Calling a friend, she answered. Within moments, from out of a nearby Carillion freighter, a small droid hovered down, its red viewing lens looking to Leah hopefully. How may I be of a service, Master? Remove the security lock on the platform controls and then disengage manual.
Krosh's eyes widened. What?
The droid floated down and began fiddling with the controls rapidly. The platform whirred and hummed, and Krosh quickly tried to move the platform from his own control terminal, but it wouldn't work. She'd locked him out of manual control. He was just stuck, floating on a hunk of metal.
What are you doing?
I think you misunderstood a few things, Lord Krosh, Leotai explained. Firstly, I'm not here to take you alive. My job was to kill you. Secondly, I put away my blaster because blasters, for the most part, are ineffective of huts on your size and thickness. She then placed her foot on the platform ominously. And third, I saw how you treated those slaves of yours, you arrogant slug. People like you disgust me.
Wait, Krosh cried. What are you going to do to me?
This eruption wasn't part of the original plan, but it'll do for what we need. In Krosh's mad attempt to escape the slave revolt, his platform went haywire and careened off the edge of the docking bay, crashing into the plasma shields below the city. The eruption cooked him alive, if he didn't already die from his massive girth hitting the shield. I think that's a fitting ending for Krosh the Hutt.
Stop! Stop! I'll pay whatever you want! He bellowed.
Pay me with your life. Oh, and Garrick sends his regards.
With that, she kicked the platform, sending it hovering away, and then, with a terrified lurch, tumbled over the side. The screams of Krosh echoing the air as he fell to his demise and out of sight.
Master, are you quite all right? Niner asked. Leah shook her head. I'll be fine, Niner. Go fire up the ship. We're leaving. Master, you do not seem well. Perhaps you would take a minute and go, she snapped. Niner turned and flew off to do as he was told, while Leah collected herself. She'd killed before, plenty of times. It was always her or the other guy, and 9 times out of 10 she knew that if the situations had reversed, they wouldn't have cared too much about ending her own life. But she never took pleasure in it. She hated when they begged for their life, hated when they cried and whimpered. It was pathetic, but also nostalgic. It reminded her of back then, when she had done the same. Simpering and crying, hiding in a closet, curled up in a ball with her arms around her little legs, trying to hold her breath so it wouldn't be heard, and praying to every god she'd ever mentioned that she would live, that she wouldn't be found by that terrifying creature, that wretched Kalish. She'd begged then, too. Begged for her life. Begged to be spared. Even as her own mother and father were dragged away to his slaving ship. She hated those memories. Hated that sensation of helplessness. And she hated when her prey resorted to the same state. She saw herself in their cries. And it repulsed her. She adjusted the dancer's costumes and hurried to the ship. As the earth rumbled beneath her, it was time to leave this planet for good. She didn't have anything else trying her here. Niner, she spoke solemnly and coolly into the radio, get the ship off the ground as soon as I'm on. Then open a line to Garrick so we can let him know we were successful. Of course, Master. And after that, grab me something strong out of the fridge. I'm dying here. All right, and that is Chapter 5 of Priceless. I hope you guys enjoyed that. While we're building up to the next story, I'll share some images with you. One second. Sorry, having to take care of something. I'm going to share with y'all a few images that have to do with this. Here we go. Here's the last one. I wanted to get all the pictures on file so that I had them to show you. All right, there we go. So let me show you the images. The first one is my buddy Jay's image of Leah Tai. Shrink the image. So that way you can see what she looked like in his mind's eye. I'll let you guys take that in for a second. And then Hannah drew her own image. And this is the image. She wanted to do a full-on design based on my specifications. So I'll let y'all take a look at that. Honestly, I think it looks pretty cool. Tech, don't do that. Don't do that. Jay did an excellent job himself. I'm not going to sit here and talk about who did better and who did worse. I'm just sharing images. Don't do that. So that was Hannah's design of Leah. And last, Hannah did a design of Leah as a little girl and Garrick when he was younger too. I really like this one. I think it's cute. All right, well, with that out of the way, we will move on to the next story. We are now on The Tale of Tomoki, Chapter 12. Before we jump into that, I do need to pull up something. One second. So if y'all remember last time, in the Tale of Tomoki, Tomoki just beat Atlas, a member of the She Triads. And I realized that I hadn't shown you the concept design for Atlas, so I'm going to show that to you real quick. Here we go. So this was my art concept design for Atlas. So now you know what he was meant to look like. All right. Well, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and read The Tale of Tomoki. We are on Chapter 12. Here we go. Written March 26, 2016.
Damn, Atlas, you look like shit.
Hermes snickered. The short man was snickering as Atlas stumbled into the Jade Dragon, clutching his gut in pain.
Shut your trap, you little bug.
Atlas snarled, stumbling into the Jade Dragon, breathing heavily. He climbed up the top floor where Mamaragon and the other executives were waiting. He'd only barely managed to escape the cops, but his injuries had slowed him considerably. Surely his ribs were broken by now. No one had ever hit him with such power before, not like this. He opened the door and looked inside. Mamaragon sat where he always did, in the shadow of the window. The others all sat in a semicircle near the back, with plenty of room for Atlas to walk in and have the floor. Any talking or discussion that had been going on ceased immediately at the sight of him, and a hush fell over the room. He clutched his side and groaned as the others just stared.
Atlas, what happened?
Artemis asked. She stood and walked towards him.
Oh, shut up like you give a damn. Maybe I do, you big ass,
she snarled. Be silent and let him speak, Mamaragon growled. What happened to you, Atlas?
Don't be angry, sir, but I went to Zhongburo and caused a little ruckus to draw out that Tomiki kid. The one who beat Tank. You did what?
Mamaragon snarled, his fist clenched.
Sir,
Your orders were to wait until Komodo came back with intel on this nuisance. Then, and only then, would I give you permission to pursue him. And yet you went to Zhong anyway.
Well, yes, sir, I know, but
You deliberately disobeyed my orders. Mamaragon turned his piercing gaze to Atlas and stood up. The entire room stiffened and a frightened hush fell over like a fog, choking the life and the courage out of anyone, including Atlas. You know my policy for disobedience, Atlas.
Yes, sir. I know, Lord Mamaragon. Please, forgive me. I only wanted to see for myself who had defeated Tank,
Atlas cried, bowing his head and shaking in both pain and fear.
He was my subordinate, sir. I wanted to get revenge for him, sir, just as you would have done if it had been one of us.
You've never been a good liar, Atlas. But I suppose there's a sliver of truth there. I would avenge any of my loyal executive members.
Oh, see, thank you, sir.
But you're not loyal, are you, Atlas? Mamaragon asked darkly. A loyal member obeys his orders to the letter. A loyal member does not lie to my face to save himself from punishment. So I'm terribly sorry, Atlas. But I will not avenge you, nor will I show mercy. Not yet. Hold on. Need to pause it because some people are, distracting me in chat. All right. Atlas gulped and the entire room began to quiver as Mamaragon sat back down, leaning his head into his fist, his face never showing. First, let me hear about this Tomiki. Tell me what happened, then we'll determine if I show mercy or not.
Yes, Lord Mamaragon, that's what I wanted to tell you, sir. Sir, he's the Golden Warrior. Tomoki's the Golden Warrior from 3 years ago. He's back!
The fear that filled the room suddenly altered itself into intrigue. There was a hum of surprise and interest at this news.
Are you sure? Hermes asked. Of course I am. But he isn't always golden. He calls himself something, some kind of a
Saiyan. All eyes turned to the new figure that just entered the doorway. He wore a cloak over his head and a long tail snaked behind him, dragging on the floor lazily. It was long, scaly, and reptilian in texture, and a cold, golden eye looked out from under the hood as matted black hair hid his face. Ah, Komodo. You arrive at last, Mamaragon muttered. What do you know of this Saiyan?
Sir,
Atlas tried to speak up. Silence, Atlas. You'll speak in a moment, Mamaragon interrupted. Komodo, tell me what you know. Komodo raised his shoulders in stumped frustration.
Little, I'm afraid. All I know is that Tomiki used to be a student at the local middle school in Zhong. and was raised by some kind woman named Belle. He's a Saiyan, some kind of alien. But I don't know much more about their race. All I know is he's got incredible powers. Strength, speed, durability, some kind of energy manipulation. Flight, too. Probably more. That golden power he uses is called Super Saiyan. I believe it heightens his power to a tremendous degree. He used that power to avenge the death of his adopted mother, and that incident is what the Golden Incident Warrior was.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you. I got the...
Atlas started speaking again, but was interrupted by a hand from Margon. Are you certain of this intel, Komodo? Margon asked, interrupting Atlas. Yes, sir, Komodo nodded. I'm positive. Margon nodded and sighed sadly. Unfortunately, it's not enough. We need to know his weaknesses more clearly. And I will not tolerate any more needless damage in Zhong than has already been done. Keep looking into it. See if you can uncover some sort of weakness in this Saiyan. Komodo nodded and walked out, not wanting to spend any more time in the room with Mamargon and his lackeys than he had to. After he was gone, Mamargon then looked to Atlas, who was on the floor glowering. Such valuable intel. An alien of some sort defends Zhong. Now this is very interesting. Had you waited, Atlas, perhaps this whole incident would not have happened. Now, do you understand the value of obedience and patience? He asked. I do, Lord Mamargon. Does this mean you forgive me? Yes, Atlas. I'm pleased with the information I've received. One way or another, I got what I desired. I'm no longer angry with you. Mamargon stood up and walked towards Atlas and held out his hand to help him up. Atlas smiled and took it. The blood-curdling scream Atlas made everyone jump to their feet. His whole body convulsed and shook violently. Blood dripped from his eyelids as his teeth chattered dangerously and his skin began to scorch in places. Everyone in the room leapt backwards as Mamargon merely held on to Atlas's hand with a glowering look of disinterest and a sneer of disgust. He let go of Atlas's hand, who then collapsed to the ground in a heap, smoke rising from his mouth. Now all is forgiven, Atlas. I'm no longer angry at you. But disobedience will never be tolerated. He then glanced up at Hermes. Get this waste of meat out of my sight. Yes, sir. Hermes ran to the unmoving body and grabbed his leg, dragging Atlas out with all his might. Mamargon walked back to his chair and sat down once again. No one wanted to make eye contact with their boss. All knew the punishment for disobedience now, and none would dare cross their leader again. Sir, Artemis finally whimpered, was that, really necessary? I made it clear for a very long time that Zhong Burrow is important to me. It is a key location to be held by our organization, and so long as we have an interest there, I will not allow more harm to come to it. Atlas's actions weren't just disobedient, they were potentially harmful to our relations in the Burrow. And I will not tolerate that any further. Have I made myself clear? Yes, sir, she answered. On to matters then. The Saiyan will prove to be a problem. Komodo will continue to dig into things and get information for us, but in the meantime, we can't simply ignore Zhong either. Artemis, you and your crew head to Zhong and see if you can't get in contact with our friends in the police. Perhaps we can find some alternative routes and move under the radar a bit more. Until we know our enemy better, I'd rather not risk open confrontation. Sir, while I'm in Zhong's burrow, Artemis asked, what do I do if I end up running into the Saiyan and he tries to challenge me? Artemis, Mamargon hissed, if you confront the Saiyan, and he has cause to think you're a threat, then clearly you did not do your job properly, and you have no more use to me. Does that answer your question? Of course, Lord Mamargon, Artemis answered, her face turning pale. I'll make sure he doesn't know what I'm doing there or who I am. Good. Dismissed. I flew back to the school well after the bell had rung. It couldn't be helped, of course. I'd stayed behind to make sure the police were okay, and then I had to be debriefed by the other officers. They didn't let me leave until after I'd told the full details of what happened. The man who had not fallen unconscious said I saved his life and thanked me, but it was hollow to me. I was happy to have saved them, but I only saved them from my own recklessness. Master Ayato was right. He'd been right all along. My Super Saiyan power was too great a risk right now. Until I could control that power output, using it in a public place was too dangerous. I hated the thought of holding back such a weapon, but after seeing what it could do today, I was not so ashamed anymore. I saw Victoria standing by the gate of the school, checking her cell phone. She glanced up as I landed near her, and she smiled, tucking her phone in her pocket and hurrying over. "Hey, Victoria," I sighed. "Sorry I missed school. I hate missing my first day."
"Oh, don't even try to lie to me, Tomiki. I know you didn't even want to go to school, period," she winked. "But I know that you'll come tomorrow."
"Yeah, so, say, where'd Warren go?" I asked.
"Oh, he went to work. He dropped out of school after the drug charges were brought to bear on him, so now he works at an auto repair shop," Victoria shrugged.
I felt my brow furrow, but I attempted to hide it. "So, you two are dating, huh?" I asked.
"Jealous?"
She giggled. I flushed and crossed my arms. A Saiyan doesn't get jealous. If you are happy with him, then I'm glad for it. She laughed and pat my shoulder like a teasing mother. It reminded me of Belle.
"I was joking, Tomiki. No need to get so defensive. Well, yes, we did date for a while. Dad never liked him and kept warning me he's trouble, and I didn't listen."
"Maybe you should have," I asked.
"Look, hindsight's 20/20, she muttered. "Regardless, about a year or so into the relationship, I found out he was doing drugs and dealing a little on the side. I ended it quick and encouraged him to get out of town before Dad has his ass in a jail cell. He's really not such a bad guy. I didn't want him to get locked up."
"Maybe you still like him?" I asked. Victoria paused a moment and turned to face me. Her eyes held no humor or teasing this time. There was nothing but sincerity in her face now.
"I think everyone deserves a second chance," she explained. "I'm not going to date him again, but I'm not so blind to believe people can't change."
"Really?"
"Didn't you?"
she asked. "I haven't changed much," I grumbled.
"Tomiki, you're completely different than you were in middle school. You're patient, calm, collected, and actually want to help people. I could tell that just from seeing you over the last 2 days."
"Thanks, I guess."
"Well, I guess you don't see it yet, but I do."
Victoria started to walk off, and with each step I felt a weight in my chest that, like a leash to a dog, drew me after her. "Victoria, look, I'm sorry if he's your friend, and obviously he deserves the benefit of the doubt, but, I mean, do you really think I'm different now? Because today when I fought Atlas,
"Atlas?" Victoria cried. "Atlas is one of the executive members of the Triads. You beat him?"
"Well, I mean, he got away, but yeah," I replied, taken aback. She beamed with a glimmer of admiration.
"Wow, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, it was cool when you beat Tank, but to take down Atlas, that must have been incredible. I knew you could save this town."
I smiled sheepishly, but tried hard not to let it go to my head again, though I felt a bit satisfied having her praise me and not defend Warren. "But, Victoria, do you think I'm that different? Today, when I beat him, I lost control, and some police got hurt because of me," I admitted sadly. "I let my power go to my head. I can't help but think nothing's changed at all."
"Well, do you think your pride is a problem?" Victoria asked.
"Yeah, I do."
"Then you're definitely different. Because the Tomiki I remember wouldn't have cared as long as he beat up the other guy. The fact you recognize your pride as a problem means there's a definite change in you."
She shoved me playfully as I blushed.
"But maybe you haven't changed that much. You're still all bashful around girls."
"Shut up," I grumbled. She was wrong, though. I wasn't bashful around girls. Just her for some reason. A reason I still didn't think I fully understood.
Still, though, I can't help but wonder what the Triad will do about this. Atlas wasn't their strongest, but he was still a big player."
Victoria wondered as we continued walking home. "Who is the strongest?" I asked.
"They call him Mamaragon. He's the leader. He's the only person the Triad is really afraid of," Victoria explained. "Apparently, he's the one who's kept other gangs and organizations in check. Not only in Xi, but here too. Supposedly, he has an interest in Zhang, but I don't know why. I don't think he's ever been here personally. But Dad actually recommended that the mayor have a contingency evacuation plan ready in case Mamaragon ever came around, because we know we can't hope to stop him."
"Really? He got some kind of special powers?" I asked curiously. Victoria shook her head.
"I don't know. A lot of our intel on Mamaragon, what little there is classified. But from the way his subordinates talk about him, he's really, really dangerous."
She then gripped my hand tightly, and I blinked, glancing back at her.
"Tomiki, I want you to promise me something."
"What is it?"
"Tomiki, if you fight him, if you meet Mamaragon, please, please, please be careful, she cried. He is merciless. He'll kill his own men if they disappoint him. There's no telling what he'll do to you. Hey, I'll be fine. Remember, I'm a Saiyan, I smiled, trying to reassure her, the fear in her eyes making me feel weak in my knees. He thinks of himself like some kind of god. Someone like that, he just can't be reasoned with, and his track record shows he's not forgiving. If he gets his hands on you, Tomoki, if he comes for me, Victoria, then I'll make him sorry he ever heard of me. I tried to laugh it off. But another thought kept coming to my mind as a thought that terrified me. I wasn't afraid for myself. I was pretty confident I could take on whatever Mamaragon thought he was. But what if Mamaragon did come here? What if he found Victoria or her father? If anything happened to her? Look, just promise me you'll be careful, okay? You too. What? She asked. Nothing. I'll be careful, I promise, I assured her. She finally sighed a little in relief, and we continued walking home. She started to talk to me about what I missed in school, but I was only half listening. Atlas had also mentioned Mamaragon, and now Victoria was speaking of him like he was the devil himself. This triad leader wasn't someone to take lightly, and if he came to this town, could I afford to fight him holding back? I needed answers. I needed to know more about this guy. The real battle would begin sooner rather than later, I felt. And that was Chapter 12 of The Tale of Tomoki. And now we are going on to move on to Chapter 13. Let me know what you guys thought. While we're waiting, I'll just put this up there again just because I love the image and I think it fits so well. Tomoki facing off with Mamaragon. It's a showdown of the ages. I actually loved writing it. Raven, what inspired Atlas? There was this guy that I knew in high school. He was really, really loud. I don't think he knew how to be quiet or how to whisper. Like, he shouted everything. And he always wore tank tops. Like, I think he wore a tank top and a jacket every day of school. He was a nice enough guy. Like, he was friendly enough, but he just always talked so loud. And boy, could he brag. He always talked about how good he was at I think it was, what did he play? Rugby? No. What was it? It wasn't football, but I think it was soccer. Maybe it was soccer. But whatever the case, he was just a loud guy. And so anytime I thought about him, whenever I thought about how do I wanted to write Atlas, that's just what came to mind. This big, boisterous punk who thought he was invincible and talked way too much. That was what I thought about. All right. Well, now that you've seen that again. But yeah, Mamaragon and Tomoki. It'll be awesome. I can't wait to get to it. And actually, you were asking if he's the final boss. He's the final boss of Act 1. The Tale of Tomoki has 3 acts. I broke the story, because it's a super long story, into 3 acts. Mamaragon is just the final boss of Act 1. Like, think about in Dragon Ball Z. The first act, like the Saiyan saga, Vegeta would be the final boss there. Then you have the Frieza saga. Frieza was the final boss there. Then you have the Cell saga. Cell was the final boss there. Then you have the Boo saga. Boo was the final boss there. It's kind of the same thing. There are 3 sagas to Tomoki. Mamaragon is just the final boss in the first one. All right. But y'all will like Mamaragon. I'm actually rewriting his character a little bit because I don't really like how I wrote him originally. Not that I wrote him bad per se, but I feel like I could have done better. I feel like I could have expanded on his character a bit more. I definitely made him intimidating, but I wanted to give him more meat to his character, like more personality. So I've been trying to build on that. But anyway. And here we go. Who had him in? Oh, the guy from school? No, I don't think he had a mental illness. I think he was just a loud guy in general. I think he just had a very loud, carrying voice, and no one ever told him to tone it down. But anyway, moving on. Tomiki, The Tale of Tomiki, Chapter 13, published April 4th, 2016.
Tomiki, are you alright?
I was halfway out the door when Hayato spoke. I glanced back at him, my backpack slung over my shoulder, and my heart was there as well. Yeah, I'm fine.
You've never been a good liar, he smirked.
Master, I'm gonna be late for school if I don't hurry.
Pfft. Tomiki, you have 20 minutes, and you and I both know you could fly there in just 5. Tell me what's bothering you.
I sighed deeply and turned around to face Hayato. Master Hayato had dropped by to visit me after the incidents of yesterday to see how I was doing. To my surprise, he had not been very harsh with me about breaking my vow to refrain from using the Super Saiyan power. Instead, he merely expressed relief that I hadn't hurt anyone. I explained to him that the She Triads last night, and he merely listened in understanding. If there was anyone I knew I could talk to about what I was feeling or dealing with, it was Master Hayato. I'm not really sure exactly what it is. It's been this way since I ran into Victoria again after all this time.
Oh, is this Victoria a friend? Hayato asked, a very familiar smirk on his face.
I guess she is, but I saw her the day I returned, and when she's around me, I feel really strange, Master. It's like that power I feel when I'm a Super Saiyan. It's not power, it's more like a feeling of weightlessness. Like it's resonating inside me.
Indeed, Hayato chuckled. Have you told her about this?
Of course not, I snapped. I mean, I don't want to make her feel like she's a problem to me, because she's not, you know? But, I don't know, that's not my problem right now.
Well, what is? He asked.
It's that Warren guy, I growled. He apparently was her boyfriend while I was away, and now he's back trying to win her over.
I see. And how does that make you feel, Tomiki?
Angry, I snarled. I just feel angry when I think about him. But I know I shouldn't, Master. He hasn't done anything wrong to me or hurt anyone.
Well, not physically, but he's hurting your heart, Hayato explained.
Tomiki, you're feeling jealousy.
There was that word again.
No, Master, I'm not jealous.
You don't know what jealousy feels like because your entire life you felt so much pride in yourself. You've never been jealous before. You don't like Warren because he's spending time with Victoria and you're afraid he'll take her from you.
Well, she's not my property. She can be with who she wants to be.
Yes, she can, Hayato sighed, but you're missing the point, son. She's free to be with and spend time with whoever she wants, but your heart aches because you don't want her spending time with this Warren character. And that is what jealousy is.
Then it sucks, I snapped, trying to go to the door again. Look, I'm not jealous, Master. I just don't trust Warren, that's all. But Victoria is not mine to control or own. If she likes Warren, then she can spend time with him.
Is that what she wants? Hayato asked.
Well, I don't know what she wants, I answered honestly.
Then the first thing you need to do, Tomiki, is talk to her. If you don't talk to her and take that step, you're going to watch her walk away from you one missed chance at a time.
I clenched up at this warning and I grit my teeth. The mental image of that terrified me to no end, and I didn't know why. I won't let that happen. I'm going to go pick her up from school right now. I dashed forward and rocketed into the sky, flying towards Victoria's house to pick her up. I'd talk to her then. I'd learned all about her. I wasn't jealous. That Warren guy was just bad news, that's all. He couldn't be trusted. That had to be it. I arrived at Victoria's house in about 2 minutes. It wasn't a long flight, and everything was that much faster while flying. I landed lightly just outside the door and knocked loudly for Victoria to come. I heard a long pause, and finally someone opened the door, but to my surprise, it wasn't Victoria, but her father.
Tomiki? He asked, surprised. What the heck are you doing here? School starts in 10 minutes, young man.
I know, I came here to pick up Victoria.
She already left. She can't fly like you can. Warren came by to pick her up a little while ago, he answered darkly. Could have sworn that kid had left, but I was wrong, obviously.
Warren did? I grumbled. All right, sure. Sorry for bothering you. I turned, my tail hanging low and my head lower. I couldn't even bring myself to fly. I walked down the pathway to the sidewalk, my heart heavier still. I'd been too late. I'd missed my chance. I prepared to fly towards school again, trying to find the optimism and drive to build up my ki again. Look out! I turned and jumped out of the way as a bicycle went flying past me at breakneck speed. "Someone help! I can't stop it!" I focused and darted after the bike, my Saiyan speed easily matching it as I caught up. The girl riding it was struggling to maintain her grip on the handlebars and was squeezing the brakes for all her worth. "Hold on!" I launched myself at her and tackled her off the bike and onto the grass beside the sidewalk when we both rolled onto the soft and itchy grass blades, while the bike went dropping and skidding along the sidewalk. I was breathing heavily, as was the girl I was holding on to. "Oh my gosh, thank you so much," she cried. "I don't know what happened. My brakes weren't working and then I started going downhill and I was so scared." I looked at the girl and took in who she was. Her hair was long and blonde and her eyes were a honey color. Her helmet had fallen off and her hair looked a bit messy. There was a small scratch on her cheek, but otherwise she was unharmed. She was wearing a brown jacket over a white t-shirt and fitted jeans with a rip in one of the knees. She was honestly rather attractive. "One of the reasons I don't ride bikes," I laughed, trying to make her feel better. She got up and dusted herself off. "Where were you going?" "I'm late for school," she explained, turning to run back to her bike. "Sorry, I really can't talk now." "Wait, I'm late too. Can I give you a lift?" I asked. She paused and glanced back at me in surprise. "Do you have a car?" "Well, no, but I can fly," I smiled. She blinked a few times and crossed her arms. "Okay, you're clearly pulling one," she laughed. I grinned and demonstrated by levitating slightly off the ground, which caused her jaw to drop fast. "Oh my god, you can fly!" "Told you." "Who are you exactly?" she asked. "My name's Tomaki." When I said my name, her eyes widened and she pointed at me in amazement. "I know you. You and I went to the same school. My name's Melody." I thought back as hard as I could, but I couldn't remember anyone named Melody. But to be fair, I didn't really pay attention to all the students at school back then. "Oh, that's cool," I tried to answer casually. "And you don't really mind carrying me?" "Not a problem," I offered. I bent over her to get on my back when suddenly she started giggling. I looked up at her confused and she shook her head. "You're not used to this, are you? That's not how you carry a lady. Here, hold out your arms." As I did, she moved her body and climbed up into my arms so that my right arm cradled her legs and my left arm cradled her torso. I was a bit surprised by this and suddenly I felt totally ashamed. Was this how you're supposed to carry girls? Was this why Victoria was spending more time with Warren? Back when I flew her around, she had seemed disappointed that she had to ride on my back and not in my arms. Had I done it wrong? Was that why she wouldn't talk to me or hang out? "Oh, I see." "You're quite cute," she giggled. "So, Tomaki, do you give these kind of rides often, or am I just lucky?" "Well, my mom and Master Hayato always told me that it's polite to help people who need it," I answered. She nodded and smiled. "Very good advice. So, can we go now? I really don't want to be late." "Oh, right. Sorry. Hold on." I jumped in the air and flew towards the school, holding Melody tightly so she didn't fall. She threw her arms around my neck to hold on, and she squealed. "Oh, was not expecting that." She cried, "This is quite amazing. How are you doing it?" "I'm a Saiyan," I replied curiously. "I said that back at my old school a few times, I'm sure." "Oh, sorry. It's just been so long, and I certainly don't remember you flying back then. I didn't know that Saiyans or whatever you are can do this." "We can," I answered gruffly. She pointed down to where the school was just appearing in the distance, and I smiled broadly. "There, try to get us down right next to the front doors." "No backseat flyers," I muttered, growing lower just under the clouds. Melody let out a laugh as we flew faster, and she brushed her hair out of her face. "This is the most amazing feeling," she laughed. I smiled at her excitement. It was a lot like Victoria's, but I couldn't think about her right now. I had to force those thoughts from mind. As we came up on the school, I landed and set her down. She stumbled a little at first, but then regained her balance and jumped up with happiness. "My word, that was great." "Glad you had fun," I replied, "but I guess we better hurry to class or we'll be late." "Right. Oh, thank you for the lift. If you ever need anything, do let me know, okay?" she asked. "Sure, thanks." Melody waved and took off for the door, and I couldn't help but sigh in defeat. Melody was very nice and attractive. Certainly she was a nice person. So why couldn't I stop thinking about Victoria and Warren? Was Hayato right? Was I blinded by jealousy? "No," I snapped. "Stop thinking that way. I don't get jealous. I'm just frustrated that she would trust that bastard at all. I mean, she admitted he used to do drugs, right? He's on course for the end." Suddenly, the bell rang, announcing that we were all late for class. Oh, crap. I tossed aside my feelings on the matter and sprinted for class as fast as I could, praying I wasn't too late. I would try to find Victoria at lunch and talk to her then. Hayato may have been wrong about me being jealous, but he was right that I needed to talk to her. I dived into the classroom just as the final toll sounded, and I looked to see all the students staring at me.
Nice of you to join us, the teacher smoked from behind his desk. Take your seat, Mr. Tomiki. My name is Tomiki, I answered. Oh, right, yes. I understand you were away yesterday on an emergency. Well, no matter, you're here now, and that's what's important. Take a seat and we'll begin class. Thanks. Somehow I could already tell I was going to be bored out of my skull for the next few hours. I really should have enjoyed flying with Melody a bit longer.
You're making a mistake, officer,
Artemis sneered. She stood in the police station facing the stern police officer. This officer was anything but clean. He'd been their double agent for the triad and a mole in the police for the last 2 years. But now he had his arms crossed and his convictions on his chest. He wasn't the same rat she knew. I don't think so. Times are changing, Artemis. I have a feeling crime isn't going to pay like it did.
We've watched your backs for the last 2 years. You're going to cut off your ties to the triad now.
Why? Artemis demanded. You didn't see that Tomiki boy take out both Tank and Atlas. If you'd seen it, you'd be questioning the winning side too. Sorry, but my role as double agent ends here.
And when Mamaragon finds out, how do you think he's going to react?
The officer suddenly trembled a moment and glanced behind her, as if Mamaragon would be coming out at her. Well, he'll have to come here to get me, and that means facing Tomiki.
That might happen sooner than you think, you rat. You know what my boss is capable of. You know how he feels about treachery. Ask yourself if you really feel like the little golden warrior can save you from him.
You're bluffing. Mamaragon almost never goes out to deal with things personally. And even if he did, I think his days are numbered.
So are yours, officer. So are yours. If I were you, I'd get out of town. Fast.
Artemis hissed, turning and marching away to call her boss. She stepped outside of the room and leaned against a wall, dialing a number. She held the phone up to her ear and waited for it to stop ringing. Yes, Artemis, Mamaragon whispered.
Bad news, sir. The rats aren't playing ball. They've grown backbones thanks to the Golden Warrior's recent victory against Atlas.
The sand is becoming more of a problem than I had anticipated.
Should I kill him?
No, Artemis. You're not ready to fight Tomiki, and furthermore, I told you to stay out of it. That much I am sure of. And killing the cop will likely expose ourselves too, so leave him alone. Leave him be and instead focus on meeting up with Komodo. Have him pass on any new intel he's gathered on the Golden Warrior and then report it back to me.
Boss, with all due respect, Tomiki doesn't know anything about me. I think that I could take care of this Tomiki myself. Perhaps if Komodo and I team up, we could kill him now.
I gave you your orders, Artemis, Margon snarled. Until we know his weakness, you are not to confront the Saiyan. Am I understood?
Yes, sir.
Good. I expect a report by the end of the day. The phone hung up and Artemis let out a sigh of relief as she had not pissed off Margon too much.
Okay, time to find Komodo, wherever he is.
And that was Chapter 13. And for those of you wanting to know what Melody looks like, I will share an image with you in just a moment, because I do have that saved too. Y'all know me, I keep everything filed. This was the concept design. I thought the design was cute. And don't worry, her character will have an important role to play. All right. Well, with that out of the way, I think we're done with the Tale of Tomiki for now. We'll pick that up next time, I think. And we'll move on to Monster Club. I think we left off on Chapter 24.
I legit did not know people could have honey-colored eyes. Oh, funny thing about that? That's a hint about who she is. So, keep your thoughts on that. Yeah, you notice a British accent. I thought that'd be a nice little addition. All right. Anyway, chapter 24. Y'all ready? Let's get started. Monster Club, chapter 24. I still don't think it's a good idea, Sarah grumbled. We don't have any better ideas, Michelle argued. The entire group was sitting around the beach with the umbrella out. The sun was now in the sky, and as such, Asher had turned back into Ashley and was hiding under it while they all discussed the one thing that was on their minds. They had missed the train home. How were they supposed to get home now? The group had been spending all morning talking about possible ideas, and Katie had presented one that they all agreed on except Sarah. It's just not right, guys, she said. It's stealing. It's necessary, Katie argued. I agree with Katie, Abraham said. We can't stay here any longer. Oh yes, God forbid Asher gets more of a tan than he already has, Tamil joked. I heard that, you bandaged bastard, Ashley snapped. The group laughed, but the joke wasn't entirely unfounded on truth. Asher was protected by the umbrella and horrendous amounts of sunblock, but he was still getting weaker with every passing day on the beach. He needed to get back home soon. Plus, the longer they were gone, the more worried that Solomon was likely becoming. Look, we all saw that schoolhouse on the way in, right? Katie argued. We just sneak in there, hotwire a school bus, get Sarah and myself in through the back, and everyone else drives off. But who will drive? Michelle pointed out. None of us are any good at it. Starting to lose hope again, the club fell downside. Wait a second. I mean, I drove everyone to the train station, remember? Abraham pointed out. Yes, you had a point. Tamil laughed. Shut up. No, he's right, Ashley said. Abraham's the only one who can possibly drive us home. So just don't eat too much before leaving, Michelle giggled. You're all jerks, Abraham growled. Calypso giggled and stood up. Guys, as much as I love the beach, we really do need to get home, and I think that the only option we can afford is to take a bus. A car's too small for us all, and the next train that goes from here to our home will be in a few days. And Asher can't wait that long. It was miraculous how much Calypso had changed in the short time Abraham had known her. She was still a little shy, but she was much better at speaking her mind than she had been in the past. Well, I still don't like the thought of stealing a public school bus, Sarah grumbled. Well, we'll do it tonight, Michelle announced. As soon as the sun sets and Asher's ready to travel, we go. Get your stuff together, guys. When night finally came, everyone was ready for action, even Sarah. Despite her misgivings, she was not prepared to abandon the family, and she too grabbed gear and hurried off to the beach. Michelle led the way with the ragtag family of misfits. Up ahead they could see the school building in all its dark and foreboding aura. Abraham had memories of school, and they were never much fun. Abraham, Sarah asked, what's school like? Imagine being stuck in a room with a bunch of people your age who are all sitting quietly as an older person does nothing but talk in a monotone voice all day long, and you repeat this 4 times a day with 1 lunch break. You're not allowed to speak or get up unless told to, and all you can do is just take notes on what the older teacher tells you. That sounds unimaginably boring, Katie noted. It's worse, Abraham assured her. At least you had the chance to enjoy it, Michelle argued. Now stay focused. Calypso was a little slower than everyone else as she was holding Tamil's hand, who needed a guide to keep up. Tamil, are you still good to... Yes, I get it done. Just get me under hood, Tamil shouted. The group finally managed to get to the back behind the school. It was too dark for Abraham to make out, but with their keen eyes, Asher and Michelle were already staring at the bus. But there was a problem. It was fenced off by a large fence, and the gates were locked with a padlock. Asher and Michelle began discussing how to get to the bus quickly when it was blocked off by a fence. I can jump the fence in bat form and land on the other side, Asher offered. We're not all gifted with such remarkable talents, bat brain, Michelle growled. Then we should, Asher grumbled. Nah, that won't give a damn. How are we going to get everyone over that thing? Maybe I climb to the top and help lift people over, Sarah offered. I mean, I would agree with that, Asher groaned, but Katie might be too heavy for you to lift. Are you saying I'm fat? Katie snapped. No, I'm not. Just, What you doing? Everyone spun around at the sound of a new voice. Standing behind them was a little girl who only looked about maybe 10 or 12 years old. She was standing in a school uniform and a wool jacket on that was clearly too big for her. She was clearly Asian and had short-cut black hair. In her left hand... Hold on, time out. I got something in my throat. Sorry. Sorry, I had something in my throat. Sorry about that. She was Asian and had short-cut black hair. In her left hand, hanging on by its arm, was a small black stuffed cat, making the girl in front of them look even smaller by comparison. She spoke with a thick accent, as if she were from a different country. Nothing, Michelle said quickly. Just, go back home, kid. Are you trying to get in? She asked. The others all looked at each other nervously. This girl had found them out. Yes, Calypso whispered. But you can't tell anyone. Asher, you might need to hypnotize her. Make her forget us, Michelle whispered. Yeah, just let me. I get you in. She smiled broadly. Before they could even respond to this, the little girl ran to the fence, not even taking notice of the strangers in front of her, and she stopped with the padlock. She grabbed it with her little hand and squeezed it. Click. The padlock fell away with a soft clunk. The entire group was dumbstruck. How had she done that? See? She giggled. How the hell did you just... No time, Michelle snapped. Thanks, kid. My name Annie, the girl replied. Yeah, well, thanks, Annie. Take care. Michelle ran into the open gate with the rest of the club right behind her. Annie acted as if she wanted to say something else, but she wasn't given the chance, as everyone was already running to the bus. Wait, how did she do that? I want to know, Abraham argued. It's never a good idea to keep ourselves exposed to people who see us, Calypso explained. It lead to questions we not want to answer, Tamil agreed. They reached the bus and Asher threw open the door with his massive strength. Now you excuse, I have work to do, Tamil said. Wait, Tamil, you're going to hotwire this thing? Abraham asked in surprise. But you're blind. Lots you not know about me, Tamil laughed. Something is learned by touch, not sight. He crawled under the driver's seat and began fiddling with things. Michelle helped him by moving aside obstacles in his way. Abraham, Asher, go and open the back of the bus for Katie and Sarah, Michelle ordered. Abraham nodded, and with Asher behind him, he ran to the back of the bus. Grabbing the handle, he threw it open. Katie slid it up to the door first and held up her hands. Help me up, she cried. Abraham reached down, and Katie hesitated for just a moment, seeing that it was Abraham. Her eyes glanced up for a moment with distrust, but then she slowly wrapped her hands around his arms and allowed him to pull. Abraham grunted and pulled as hard as he could, but Katie was unexpectedly very heavy, considering her snake lower body. You've almost got her, Asher said proudly. He jumped the seat and rushed to Katie's side, wrapping his arms around her and tugging the rest of her body in. Katie let out a loud grunt of pain as she plopped down on the hard floor. Ow! She shouted. Sorry, Abraham muttered. No, it's fine. Let's get Sarah. To their surprise, Sarah had less trouble getting up the door than Katie. It was fitting her in that was difficult. She had to slip all 8 of her legs in first, while Asher tried to squeeze her large abdomen through the small doorway. These things weren't made for dritters, she moaned as she was struggling to fit through. Just hang in there, Asher growled, pushing hard and hard until at last her whole body popped through and landed on top of everyone. The back of the bus was now a mass of struggling arms and legs as people tried to find out who was who and whose feet were in whose face. Damn it, this was such a bad idea, Katie groaned. Shut up, Asher growled. At least we made it. Okay, guys, think I got it, Tamil shouted, and as he said it, there was suddenly a loud roar as the bus came to life. It was a sound that Abraham knew well, but for the first time he was glad to hear it. The school bus was on. Well, Abraham, get going, Sarah laughed. Drive. Abraham nodded and ran to the front seat. Everyone get seated, Abraham shouted. I've never driven a bus before, so this could take a moment to get used to. Has anyone had time to write their wills yet? Michelle joked. Not funny, Michelle, Abraham growled. Abraham punched the gas, and the bus began to lumber forward like a giant sleepy beast. Asher jumped into the back seat, and Katie coiled up in 3 seats at once. Sarah was forced to remain in the aisle, squished between the seats. Calypso threw herself into the middle seat next to Tamil, who was clutching her for dear life. Calypso wasn't exactly in the best moods either. Apparently she had a fear of vehicles. Michelle was sitting behind Abraham's driver's seat to direct him. Her animal instincts were the only direction they had to get back home. Okay, here we go. Y'all ready? Abraham shouted as he turned onto the highway. Ready to what? Crash? Katie laughed. Before Abraham could tell her off, there came a strange sound from under his seat. Ha ha ha! That funny! Abraham looked down to see a very familiar face poke out from under the chair. It's you! He cried. And sure enough, the little Asian girl who had gotten them in from the padlock in the first place popped out from under the chair. Yes, she laughed. I wanted to come too. Michelle growled and yanked her out from under the chair with a snarl. What on earth is the matter with you? She snapped. Don't you have any common sense? Nothing is matter, she answered kindly. I just want to come with. But why? Calypso asked, looking over the girl. You so amazing, she exclaimed. No one steals a school bus from school before. It is cool. As she spoke, Abraham suddenly heard a puttering and looked at the gauges on the bus.
Everything seemed fine until he saw a little red indicator that looked like a battery. Ah, damn it! This bus was in the empty lot for a reason. Its battery is almost shot, Abraham shouted. You mean we're stranded? Asher shouted. Sorry, guys, Abraham apologized. Move over, Annie giggled, running to the dashboard. Sit here, Mr. Blackie, she laughed, setting the little black cat on the dashboard. She then placed both of her hands on the black dashboard and closed her eyes as if in deep thought. Then she pushed down. Bionge! There was a flash of light that blinded Abraham and Michelle for a moment, but the rest of the Monster Club could only stare in stunned amazement as a small torrent of power soared from her hands and into the bus. The indicator on Abraham's dashboard vanished, and the bus roared to life with the same vigor it had before. Despite its loud rumbling, no one dared breathe a word. Everyone's eyes and expressions were fixed on the little creature standing before them with the stuffed cat toy, but their expressions were not impressed. Michelle looked in shock. Sarah had her hands clasped over her mouth in stunned amazement. Katie was backing against the back of the bus, terrified. And though he couldn't see it, the way Calypso was gripping Tamil made him uneasy as well. Asher was almost on his feet, staring at the girl, his red eyes wide in surprise. Magic! You just used magic! Asher gasped. She turned around and smiled her cute little smile and giggled. My name is Soyeon, but you call me Annie. I am Manyo, a Korean witch. No one said a word, and it was like the world had gone completely quiet. She then gasped and picked up her cat. Oh, and this is Mr. Blackie. All right, and that was chapter 24. All right, let me pull up the next chapter. Chapter 25. Before we read it, I might as well show you what Annie looks like. I do have an image. Actually, funny story, Annie was the only Monster Club character that Hannah herself designed, believe it or not. First, I'll show you Hannah's design of her. And then I will show you Turtle's design of her. It's a little blurry, I know. Oh God, not the old drawing. Well, that was what you drew her. That's how you drew her, Hannah. I thought it was cute. So that's Annie. And now I'll show you a different image drawn by Turtle. Blackie's a doll or a cat. Blackie's a stuffed toy. So now you know. And you can thank Turtle for the new art. She made this little sprite for the video game. All right. Well, tell you what, I'll leave it up there while I read the next chapter. How about that? That'll be fun. All right, 1 second. All right. Chapter 25, Monster Club, written December 21st, 2014. This can't be real, Calypso whispered to the group. The entire club was huddled together in front of the park bus as Annie sat quietly in the back watching them. After she had announced what she was, the group had told her to wait in the back while they talked. She did so very compliantly, but now the conversation among the club was hushed and very tense. It's real, all right. We all saw her use some kind of spell to power the bus, Michelle growled. I didn't see it, Tamil joked. Not now, Tamil, Katie snapped. What do we do with her? How can you all even be debating this? Sarah asked. It's obvious what we do. We take her with us. And put our family at risk, Michelle asked. Risk? Abraham seemed confused. She's a kid. She can't be that dangerous, even if she is a witch. The fact that she is a witch is what makes her so dangerous, Asher whispered. I just don't understand, Abraham admitted. The club exchanged glances, and they all looked to Michelle for an explanation. Witches, Michelle began. Well, they're supposed to be extinct. Like, for the last 3 centuries, I think? A long time ago, witches were all over the world, and all of them had a taste for trouble. They possessed the ability to manipulate the arcane elements around them in a form of magic. It's a power that humans and monsters alike could not hope to possess or compete with. Okay, but I still don't see the problem, Abraham said. Look, witches used to use their powers to oppress humankind. You know the witch trials? They were also more than willing to use monsters in their schemes and plots as well. And it was thanks to humanity's superstitions and fears that led to a complete eradication of witches all around the world. Since then, no one has ever heard of any real witches in society today. Witches also at my time in Egypt, Tamil spoke up. I remember when I was little. Very mean and bad witches in desert. Steal souls and go great harm. Abraham looked back at Annie, who was still sitting quietly with her stuffed cat and hugging it tightly. Okay, maybe so, but do you really think that kid could be such a threat? I mean, she seems harmless to me, Abraham spoke up. Many things do, Ash admitted. But I don't want to potentially put our family at risk. Now, hold on just a second, Sarah snapped. You can't honestly be suggesting we abandon her simply because she's a witch. Sarah, I understand how you must feel, but what? Are you all forgetting that our club was made for this? It was to help people just like her find a home, Sarah argued. I think Sarah's right, Calypso mumbled. Calypso? Everyone turned to look at the timid mermaid. I mean, if we turn her away simply for what she is, then what kind of club would we be? I mean, she's no different than Abraham, right? There was a wave of silence washing over everyone as this information came through and sank in. What if she does turn out to be dangerous? Katie asked. I mean, do you really think Asher can't handle a child? Sarah argued. If she's a threat, then Asher can easily take her down. But just look at her. Does that look like a cold-hearted, wicked witch to you? Everyone shot a glance at Annie. Annie looked up, seeing them all staring at her, and she looked a little flustered by their gaze and waved. What? She asked. Rather than answer, the group went back to looking back at each other and discussing what to do with her. Okay, look. We've been stationary for too long, Asher said. Abraham, go get the bus rolling back for home. We'll talk to Solomon about what to do with Annie when we get back. For now, though, she'll stay. Abraham nodded and ran to the front of the bus, and as he sat down in the front seat, he looked out the windshield and saw at least 4 beams of light scanning the area. Were those flashlights? There were people out here looking for them? Guys, there's people out there, Abraham called. Michelle ran to the front and looked out as well. Why didn't I smell them coming? She gasped. Oh no. Everyone turned at the little squeak that Annie gave out. You know them? Michelle asked. It's those men. One's looking for me, Annie whimpered. Please don't let them get me. Why do they want you? Katie asked. It not matter, Tamil shouted. If they hear for her, they find us too. We need to get out of here. Abraham nodded and powered up the bus. The headlights came on and fell on the 4 men, only to reveal there was a 5th that he hadn't noticed. He was tall and bald. His eyes were a terrifying dark red, and he was wearing a long coat over his body. His face had a few scars on it, and his hands were reaching into a holster by his waist as if to pull out a gun. When the lights fell on him, Michelle let out a small scream. It's him! She screamed. Who? Abraham asked. Abraham, drive, now! Abraham kicked the engine and forced the bus forward, causing all the men in front of the bus to leap out of the way. The only one who didn't dive for cover was the mysterious fifth man who had no flashlight. He was already running after the bus with unbelievable speed. At the rate he was running, he'd actually catch up soon. "Can't this thing go any faster?" Katie screamed. "I'm going as fast as I can," Abraham shouted. Sarah was holding Annie close, who was crying in fear. Asher was gripping the seat in front of him tightly, trying hard not to go insane with rage. Michelle looked at him. "I know how you feel, Asher, but this isn't the time," Michelle growled. "Wait, Asher, you know that guy?" Abraham gasped. "Well, I would hope so." The entire club let out a shout of shock as they spun around to see the emergency door hanging open and the bald man standing inside the bus. He had an amused smirk on his face, and he looked around at everyone. He saw Annie and moved towards her. Sarah leaped out to attack him, but with a simple shove, he threw Sarah off the seat and into the aisle. "Sarah!" Katie screamed, slithering out to her fallen friend. The man grabbed Annie's wrist and yanked her up. "It's time for me to go. I'll take this little one with me. Consider yourselves lucky that I'm not here for any of you." Whatever it was he had wanted to say, he never finished. Asher was on his feet in seconds with his pistol out. He fired off 3 shots at the man, causing him to stagger back and drop Annie. The look on Asher's face was of pure loathing and rage. "You bastard! You goddamn bastard!" Asher snarled. The man leered at Asher and finally gave a sneer. "You've not changed a bit since last time, kid." "You're wrong. I'm a lot different now. I can kill you!" Asher barked. "Interesting as a fight like that sounds, I'm afraid I'm not here to fight you to the death. I'm just here for the witch," he laughed. "The girl's with us," Michelle shouted, causing Annie and Abraham to both turn and face her. "You know, I wasn't asking your permission." The man made another move for the girl. It all happened in a flurry of movement that Abraham's eyes could barely follow. Asher darted forward, his pistol out and ready to meet the man in front of him. The man moved back to avoid the attack, but Asher was a few seconds faster, pointing the gun at the man's chest, and he unloaded his clip into the man, who was being knocked backwards with each shot. Even after he finished shooting, Asher kept coming after him, finally hitting him so hard across his jaw that he could have sworn he heard the jaw break. "I'll kill you!" Asher roared. He grabbed the man's throat, ready to rip it out. There was so much hate in Asher's voice, so much rage. He'd never seen Asher this way. It wasn't like him at all. How did Asher know him? Why did he hate him so much? And the bigger question was, after being pumped with so much lead, how come this man didn't seem fazed? Yes, the stranger seemed rather amused, in fact. He was smiling. What was he? "You really want to do this now, son?" he laughed. "Son?" Abraham gasped. "Aw, you didn't tell the club I was your daddy?" "You're not my father. You forfeited that title." Asher swung a kick at his father's chest, sending him stumbling to the emergency exit in the back of the bus. Asher was about to throw him out of the bus when his father grabbed hold of Asher's collar and grinned. "Well, looks like we need some father-son time, huh? No time like the present?" He leaned back, still holding on to Asher, and the two fell out of the bus into the night. Everyone screamed. Michelle threw on her coat and ran to the door where they'd fallen out. "Abraham, turn the bus around the first chance you get and come back to pick us up. I'm going to go help Asher." "Michelle, don't!" Katie cried. You're no match for Drake. Asher, best chance we have," Tamil agreed. "Asher is in over his head and he's not thinking clearly. We don't have time to debate this. Just do what I say." Michelle didn't wait for their protest, but flung herself out the door and towards the father-son battle going on. Katie slammed the door shut behind her and spun to Calypso. "Calypso, go get Annie and take her to the front of the bus. Abraham, turn this thing around." Abraham nodded and began to turn the bus, but it wasn't easily concerning, considering it was still a paved road, and he was struggling to get the giant vehicle to stay in control. After a few moments of fighting the steering wheel, Abraham managed to get it to turn around. As he was driving it around, Calypso and Tamil worked together to pull down the emergency exit window. "Once it's down, Sarah, you use your web to lasso Michelle and Asher back onto the bus. Abraham, don't even think about slowing down," Katie shouted. I got it, Abraham called back, scanning the street for the fight. And after a minute or two, he could make out the figures ahead of him. And what he saw was shocking. Asher and Drake were both locked in a vicious exchange of punches and kicks, which were clearly far stronger than those of a normal human. You could almost feel their impact just watching them. Michelle threw herself in whenever Drake was about to make a fatal blow, or Asher, and she could attack or distract him. She clearly knew she wasn't a match for Drake, but she could at least handle him long enough to throw off his timing and aim. It was a very effective tag team that they had going, but the real victor of this battle wasn't a mystery. As strong as they were, Asher and Michelle were both tired from the events of the last full moon, and Drake still had enough energy to keep going. "Sarah, reel them in!" Calypso cried. Sarah stuck her upper body out the window and flung her long thread of silk out to Michelle and Asher. Michelle managed to grab hold, but Asher was at the last moment grabbed by Drake and held back. "No!" Sarah screamed. "Asher!" Sorry, but I'm afraid my son is grounded indefinitely, Drake laughed. Asher thrashed and struggled, but Drake's strength to be on the same level as Asher's. He couldn't free himself. Abraham prepared to slam on the brakes.
Waze!
The air ignited like fireworks, and Drake's coat suddenly was alight with flames. With a roar of pain and shock, Drake threw Asher to the ground and began beating at his blazing coat. His fire jumped all over his body, allowing it to pull him back in through the window. Standing by the other window of the bus was none other than Annie, the little witch who had cast the spell to free Asher.
Annie, did you do that? Sarah asked. Yes, she whispered. I didn't want him to get anyone else.
Abraham smiled and kept driving the bus onward until the monster was far off in the distance. Thank you, Annie. We owe you our lives. Asher nodded, breathing heavily. Annie smiled meekly and gave a small nod.
Was that man your dad?
Annie asked. Abraham glanced back as well, wanting to hear what Asher said. Asher didn't answer right away, but instead leaned against Michelle, who was helping to support his exhausted body. Yeah, his name's Drake Cross. He was my father. And he was also the one who turned me into a vampire, Asher explained. You mean, yes, okay, my father's a vampire. He killed my mother and made me a monster like him.
And that was chapter 25. And we will stop there for now. Now, we probably have enough time to read one or two more stories. But we've read 2 chapters of Monster Club, 2 chapters of Tomiki, and we finished Priceless. So, now it's time to decide. There are 2 stories I can read tonight. Both are long-running stories. So I will give you the choice. Here they are. First, I tried to read Shogun of Crime last time. Because of the behavior of one person, we kind of faltered and fell through. But I am willing to read the next chapter. I'm willing to give Shogun of Crime another shot. That is one option. I will be more careful with my language this time. But I am willing to give it a shot. The second one is a story called The Tempest Blade. It's a fantasy story that I wrote a long time ago. It is not done. Neither is Shogun of Crime, but they are long-running and would give us something to read. Those are the 2 options. I will post a poll and allow y'all to decide amongst yourselves. While you do, I will get a drink. Alright, now comes the voting. I'll leave it to you guys for a minute while I remove this picture. Whoa, Havoc's here wanting Shogun of Crime. Well, I guess that settled it. If Havoc's here wanting Shogun of Crime, then I guess we'll do that. And here's what I'll do. I will reread the first chapter for you guys since I deleted the original stream with the first chapter, and I'll read the second chapter. But I'm glad Havoc's here. That's kind of cool. How'd your stream go, Havoc? Let me know while I go to the chapter. I gotta pull up the story. I've got everything filed away, so I gotta pull it up. Here we are. Shogun of Crime. I'll go ahead and share with you guys some of the images for Shogun of Crime, if you'd like. 1 second. Because I got images. I got images for sure. Was good, mate? Excellent. Always glad to hear that, mate. Always glad to hear that. Can't wait to join you tomorrow, man. If you're going to stream tomorrow, I'll be there, bro. I'll be there. No question. Alright, so first I'm going to show you Hannah's image of Oichi Taiga, the main character. So the main character of this, Enjoyable will stream again tomorrow so you can join. Got it, Havoc. I'll be there. No question. So this is an image that Hannah drew of Oichi. It's a chibi image. For those who don't know, Shogun of Crime is a crime drama story. but a unique one. Basically, the setup of the story is that you have a young daughter of a Yakuza crime lord who has moved to America to have an arranged marriage with a mafia boss. But the mafia boss that she's going to marry has some problems that she intends to fix. And here's the cool part of the story. Here's the cool part. Everything that happens in the story is actually a reflection of the real story of the conquest of Oda Nobunaga in Japanese history. Oichi represents Nobunaga, and each character that's involved, well, most of them anyway, represent another figure in Japanese history. So all the events that take place are meant to represent different aspects of Oda Nobunaga's rise to power. So that was my goal here, to kind of retell that story in a unique way. So that is Hannah's old chibi of Oichi, and now I'll show you Jay's image, because Jay drew an image of Oichi as well. So let me pull that up. God, that's huge. 1 second. Gotta decrease the size. Here we go. Jay always draws everything way too big. There we go. So that now you can see what she looks like. Actually, her name is a giveaway. Her name is Oichi, and that was the name of Oda Nobunaga's sister. All right, so since we have everyone ready to read Shogun of Crime, and we've got Havoc with us, which is a real surprise, we'll end the poll, because I think it's been decided, and I'll go ahead and pull up the first chapter of Shogun of Crime. Let's get started. Shogun of Crime, Chapter 1, written January 10th, 2018. Here we go. She walked out of the airport doors wearing a lovely red dress. Her hair was long and tied back in a ponytail, and her lovely golden eyes skimmed the roads and streets. People bustled like busy ants to and from the doors and parking lot. They seemed to give her little inclination or care. She pulled along her 2 suitcases, searching for the man to receive her. Her raven black hair swished behind her, and her heeled shoes clicked on the steps with each step she took. Her patience was running thin, until at last she saw a man standing at the bottom of the stairway by a long black car. He had up a sign that read, Oichi Taiga, her name emblazoned upon its white surface, beckoning her to it like a light in the stormy sea. She approached the man, and he lowered the sign. "You Oichi?" he asked. "Yes, I am," she replied politely. As she gave a bow, she took note of the man's attire versus what the driver of the vehicle was wearing, and she was not impressed. While this gentleman was wearing a white button-down suit with an overcoat, the driver of the vehicle was wearing a shirt far too long for his body, baggy pants, and a hairdo that made Oichi feel sick. Both men were black, but both were incredibly different in manner and in attitude. It didn't take much for Oichi to guess who she would take more to. The respectable man gave a gesture to get in the car as Oichi climbed in calmly. "Welcome to New Murcia," he sighed. He sat down to the seat next to her and leaned forward. "Start driving." The man up front grunted and started pulling away from the airport. The inside of the car stank of weed and something she'd rather not want to think about. "We'll be meeting Boss Heyman in a while. He's in the meeting with an important business client," the respectful man explained. "My name's Mason. I'm to be your guide and retainer." "Nice to meet you, Mason," Oichi replied. "So, from what I gather, you're, from Kyoto, Japan? And your father was, I'm sorry, my Japanese ain't that great." "Wakagashira," Oichi replied. "Think of it as second in command." "And what does it mean?" "Just second in command," Oichi replied. She didn't feel the urge to explain it. Just bringing up her father seemed to drain the patience right out of her, considering she was only here because of him, for his sake. The Aizuku Kotetsu Kai, the 4th largest Yakuza family in Japan, wasn't technically a family itself, but actually a federation of over 100 smaller families and organizations within the Yakuza who required this unity to maintain power. Her family, the Saru Togumi, was only a small family within its ranks, but her father had been a respected lieutenant in the Aizuku Ketsu, making it all the way to the position of Wakagashira, the underling and middleman between the leader, the Oyabun, and his underlings. He had power, prestige, and status. In the words of an American filmmaker, he was a made man. But that changed 2 months ago. Her father had screwed up. He failed to deliver an important message about a change in delivery for a stash of drugs. The police caught wind, and thousands of yen were lost in the deal. Her father was dishonored and faced an execution at the hands of the Aoyabun, until she stepped in. The task she undertook was a simple one, and it would spare her father and restore his name, but as the car drove deeper into New Mercia, she felt dread creep into her very soul at the prospect. Mason seemed to sense this and tried to smile encouragingly. Hey, he's excited to meet you, you know, he pointed out. He's been talking about it quite a bit. The plan will be very advantageous to your organization as well as ours.
What kind of man is your boss? What is Heyman Johnson like? Oichi asked.
A good man. He's hit some rough patches here and there, but he's a decent leader. Man, you one lying mother, the driver scoffed. Mason shot him a dirty look. I didn't ask your opinion, CJ.
No, please, explain, Oichi interjected. What do you mean?
It like this, CJ continued. The boss ain't one for work, if you know what I mean. It ain't like he a dick or nothing, but you can't count on him to do what you gonna do. CJ enough. And more than that, I'm glad he ain't I ain't you, bitch. He ain't what I call an ideal fucking material.
Shut up,
Mason roared. He looked at CJ with a look that could shatter glass. But the damage was done. Oichi had heard the truth now. Her future husband, Heyman Johnson, was a reprehensible fool, from the sound of it. To be fair, though, CJ didn't seem like much of a respectable character himself, but Oichi had learned that it was often the street rats who knew the most to tell. Look, all of that may sound bad, Miss Taiga, but I guarantee that things will go a lot smoother when you're by his side, miss. Mason tried to reason. Oichi's first impression of Mason was that he was a respectful fellow, very much a good underling for a boss, but she could tell he was weaving lies. From the way he spoke, he too had little respect for his boss. This Heyman seemed even worse in her opinion, and yet that wasn't what set her off. Something about his phrasing struck out.
What do you mean, go a lot smoother?
Oichi asked. Mason grumbled and looked at CJ as if blaming him for this whole conversation even happening. Well, ma'am, truth is...
The truth would be nice, Mason.
Right. All right, I'll be blunt. We're up shit creek without a paddle.
I'm rather familiar with this creek, Oichi hissed. Please explain how deep we're in.
Our organization prides itself on drug trafficking and smuggling, but Heyman he's throwing away resources on his pastimes and fucking gambling. He's racked up debt with bigger and more dangerous crime syndicates in the city, and now we're being harassed by one called the Black Death Syndicate.
And what is being done about it?
Well, that's the trouble we're in, I fear. Damn boy got the 5-0 in their back pocket, CJ pointed out. We can't do shit lest they back off. Unfortunately, he's right.
5-0. Sorry, I'm not familiar with the slang.
And yet your English is nearly flawless, Mason praised. He means police. The police work for the Black Death Syndicate. In fact, the police have relations and connections with many gangs and crime families in the city. Oichi turned and looked Mason dead in the eyes, disbelief on her face.
Are you serious?
The police union bosses are more corrupt than some of the gangs out here. And as long as the gangs in their payroll give a cut of their profits, the police look the other way, and at times, they'll even provide support for their operations. Money makes the crime go round, as they say, Mason growled. Oichi looked out the car window and sighed, her breath fogging the glass. Outside, she watched people like blurring objects shoot by, and buildings, massive and imposing, glared down at her.
And you think I'll make a difference from marrying Heyman? She asked.
It's my hope that you will, Mason admitted. Perhaps having a reasonable voice at his side will convince him to step up and deal with the problems at hand.
I guess,
Oichi muttered. The car came to a halt at a gas station. CJ climbed out to fill the tank, leaving Mason and Oichi alone in the car together with the awkward silence. Mason crossed his arms over his chest and blew slowly from his lips, as if he were trying to kill the silence somehow.
Answer me this,
Oichi finally spoke.
Back in Kyoto, I had heard stories of your American mafias, Godfathers, Al Capone, and other figures. I can believe you to be from such stories, but CJ, I cannot imagine him as one who would belong to such a world. He strikes me as common street punk. Are there many like him in the organization?
Mason frowned and shook his head. I hate to admit it, miss, but those stories you heard, mafia lords and dignified criminals, that died out with the 60s. CJ is a street punk, but street punks are what make up the majority of the gangs and criminal groups in the city, Mason answered. Oichi didn't need Mason to tell her that. Any hope she had now was dashed. Each step she took into this new world, this new future, felt more and more hopeless. The man she was to marry was a lazy fool who was running his group into the grave. The police force was just as corrupted and cold-hearted as the criminals, and they controlled the streets. And the criminal organizations weren't the dignified and refined mafia gangsters she'd heard about, but instead street-smart punks with backwards hats and baggy basketball shirts.
What of
the Yakuza? Mason asked. Are they that greatly different?
In almost every way,
She growled back. Mason saw CJ removing the nozzle from the gas pump and putting it away. Mason leaned over and looked in Oichi's eyes. Miss Taiga, I worked with this organization back when Boss Heyman's uncle was the head, and it sickens me to my soul to see what's happened to it, but I can't leave it. It's what his uncle built up from the ground here. When I heard a daughter of a high-ranking Yakuza family member was going to marry our boss, I felt real hope for the first time in years. With your leadership and guiding wisdom, perhaps Heyman could be persuaded to see reason. Reason is lost on fools, Oichi sighed.
But let me meet my fiancée, and then we'll see what can be done.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to at least try, Mason smiled.
I do this for my father and for my family, not for you, and definitely not for Heyman.
Oichi said Heyman's name as if she were spitting it across the street, and Mason sensed her disgust, looking away. CJ climbed back in the car and sat down, and finally the car drove off again, and Oichi felt it dragging her away to her destiny. In the Yakuza, loyalty, respect, and civility are not only admired, it is expected. They refer to themselves and their families as Ninkyo Dantai, which means chivalrous organizations. First, they were true that they were criminals, and they profited off of darker and more illegal practices, but her family, all the best families, respected dignity and courteousness. 3 years ago, when the earthquake shook Tohoku and the tsunamis ravaged the land, it was their organizations that supplied relief and support to the needy. When a common street punk killed a police officer in cold blood, her family hunted the rat down with the same efficiency and dedication as the police themselves, sometimes with even more tenacity. The Aizuko Ketsu Kai, the Inagawa Kai, the Sumiyoshi Kai, or even the Yamaguchi Gumi. Whatever Yakuza family you observe, they were all criminal groups, yes. But they were also honorable, dignified, and in a bizarre way to the commoner, respectable. That was why Oichi had been so interested to see the famous mafia crime families of America, only to learn such codes of dignity and respect did not exist for the gangs of America today. She shook her head and rubbed her brow.
Oh, Father, what have I gotten myself into?
She asked herself quietly. I do apologize for the situation you find yourself in, ma'am, but I am hoping that in time you'll make this city and our organization your home, Mason offered as they pulled up to a small garage meant for car repairs, though it looked out of commission for ages. Was this their headquarters? Oichi grumbled. She looked out to see her new home.
Maybe perhaps I can learn to make this place a home, but for that, I'll have to make some changes. Big changes.
Well, I'm looking forward to those changes, Mason smiled encouragingly. Oichi smiled back as she climbed out of the car. She didn't say it, but she had a feeling Mason might not appreciate all she had planned in terms of her changes. Her plans were already beginning to formulate. She would salvage this hell, even if it killed her and a few others in the process. And that is Chapter 1 of Shogun of Crime. And since we have finished that now, we will move on to Chapter 2. Here we go. Again, I will be as careful as I can with the language, but I hope you guys liked that. And Havoc, if you're still there, thank you for being up this late with me. Anyway, here we go. Chapter 2, written February 9th, 2018. The garage itself was nothing special on the outside. It was tall and covered in graffiti in certain places. The side doors were caged and locked up. Mason had to approach with a key and undo the padlock so we could get in. Oichi looked around rather unimpressed and just shrugged her shoulders in a disapproving fashion. CJ smirked at this and nudged her. You're gonna love how it is on the inside, girl.
My name is Oichi, not girl,
Oichi grumbled. Don't pay him any attention, ma'am, Mason sighed. He was raised by wolves. At least I'm trying to be something I ain't, CJ snapped back, causing Mason to frown and shoot him a venomous glare. Oichi raised an eyebrow.
What does that mean, Mason?
Showed you. A story for another time, ma'am, he replied. Welcome to our little base of operations. With that, he opened the door to let Oichi in. While the outside had been quite unsatisfactory, the inside, however, was another story entirely. While there were broken or repaired cars parked in the spaces, there was just for cover. Oichi noticed that the doors of the cars looked slightly more new, refurbished than the rest of the cars. Seeing where she was looking, CJ grinned. "You notice our doors?" he chuckled. "We put in these doors on our shipment cars every time we go to deliver." "Why these doors?" Oichi asked. CJ walked to the nearest one and opened it. He then pulled out a small pocket knife and cut a small hole in the fabric on the inside of the door, revealing at least 5 bags of white powder that Oichi recognized to be cocaine. This was the Heyman secret, hiding the drugs inside the doors of cars. "Where do you make the drugs?" Oichi asked. "We don't," Mason explained. "We're the distributors for cartel across the borders. We used to make our own supply, but that ended 8 years ago." "What happened 8 years ago?" Oichi asked. "The new boss took over," Mason sighed. "Boss Heyman sold most of our good equipment to pay off gambling debts." Oichi sneered and crossed her arms. "So now we split in profit with the cartels. They get a cut, we get a cut," CJ added. "And so does the Black Death Syndicate," Mason snapped. "See, the Black Death group is a gun smuggling group as well as drug dealers. They've got their hands in both markets. They only allow us to exist in their territory if we pay them a tribute fee every few months." "And if you do not pay?" "Things start to get worse," Mason grumbled. "First, all our dealers and street urchins who distribute start disappearing, working for the Black Death Syndicate instead of us. Then our cartel suppliers get squeamish and stop responding to our calls. And finally, if we still don't pay up, they call the police on us." "I see. And what's Heyman done about it?" "Man, he ain't done jack shit," CJ laughed. "I don't remember the last time that bitch came out of his house." "Shut it!" Mason snarled. "He's in his house?" Oichi asked. "I was under the impression you were taking me to him." "We are. He was supposed to be here to greet you. I'm sure he's in the back," Mason explained. With a polite nod, he led Oichi and CJ into the back of the garage, away from the cars. Beyond those doors was a large office area with a few punks hanging around inside, smoking cigarettes and weed at the same time, and looking either bored or downright depressed. A few took note of Oichi, and one made a catcall, causing Oichi's nose to wrinkle in disgust. But something was amiss. Where was the boss? Where there was a large desk in the corner where a boss or leader would rest, there was no one. Mason seemed just as troubled. "Where's Heyman?" Mason asked one of the grunks. "Ain't seen him," he answered him gruffly. "Still at the estate, I guess. He was supposed to meet us here. Why is he still there?" "Why don't you go and ask him?" Another thug spat. "Get out of here, man. You're ruining our break." One Hispanic man in the corner whispered something in Spanish to his buddy and laughed. The room didn't take Mason seriously, nor Oichi. She had a feeling this break of theirs was actually how they always were. This almost didn't seem worth her time. Mason growled and marched out of the office and back to the garage. "My apologies, Miss Tyga. It would seem that Heyman forgot about our meeting." "Forgot or didn't care," Oichi grumbled as she was led back towards the car. She noticed CJ had stayed behind to get high, and Mason didn't seem to mind. He took the driver's seat and cranked on the ignition. "Hard to know, but we have to head to his estate." "If Heyman is owing money to other rival gangs, why does he have estate?" Oichi asked. "Well, his dad gave it to him, to keep him out of trouble." "His dad?" Oichi questioned. "Heyman's grandfather was a made man in a Sicilian mafia family, back in the good old days. Heyman's father and his uncle are both strongly loyal to the mafia, but Heyman himself is a disappointment to his family, squandering money away and wasting his life on material things rather than dedicate himself to something real. To keep him from disgracing the mafia further, they gave him his little drug organization and a nice fancy-ass estate to run, and it keeps him busy and content." "With all due respect, it sounds to me like your boss is a fool," Oichi muttered. Mason sighed and gave a curt nod, not turning to look at her. "Yeah, it's true. Heyman's a bastard. Everything CJ says is the truth, but that doesn't change the fact he shouldn't say those things. If we don't show respect to authority, then we're no better than common crooks. Look, like you, I respect the mafia and its strong ties of loyalty and devotion. I'm afraid that it's a bygone age, though. Now I suppose we truly are just a band of crooks and criminals with a big name." "Mason, you don't strike me as a typical gang member," Oichi pointed out. "You speak politely, and you show a sense of respect and duty. I don't sense from the others." "Why?" Mason fell silent, focusing on the driving. "I find out eventually, so might as well tell." "I grew up to a family poor as dirt," Mason answered, "but my parents busted their asses to get me to college. I went to Yale University." "Yale?" Oichi cried. "I know. Shocking, right?" He chuckled. "I was going to get my business degree. Start a booming business, become a CEO, and pay my parents back for everything they gave me." He sighed, and his smile vanished. "But 2 years into my time at Yale, my father died and my mother suffered from dementia. I went home to take care of her, giving up my college career to do so. She died almost a year later in a car accident. Oichi and Mason both were so silent that now the car engine sounded as if it was the radio speaker. Oichi bit her lip and looked down, unsure how to respond or what to say towards that. She didn't need to, though. Mason continued. I tried picking my life back up, tried working hard to get back in college, but it seemed like everything had fallen apart for me. I took out loans to pay for my home and food, and soon I was so caught up in debt that, well, I went to the only people who could help me.
The mob.
Oichi concluded. I met Heyman's uncle, who offered to pay off my debts in exchange for employment under him. As long as I didn't have to kill anyone or take part in the drug smuggling itself, I agreed. And ever since, I've been running the numbers for Heyman's uncle and now Heyman himself. But like before, it feels like a waste of time. I'm a no one to this gang, just some college boy dropout who was pretending to be someone I could never be. Just some black kid from nothing, believing he could be a CEO of his own business. Even now, it's hilarious.
It is not, Oichi snapped back. Don't mock yourself for trying to rise above where you began. Humanity has made its entire existence built on that notion of succeeding beyond limitation.
Pretty words, Mason shrugged, but idealism often falls in the face of reality.
Not if the ideal is made a reality, Oichi replied. I cannot promise your CEO position or a college degree, but if you stick with me and keep showing that same dedication and respect you have been, I will do everything in my power to make sure you reach your goals.
Mason shot Oichi a glance and gave it an amused smile. You know, I got a good feeling about you, Miss Taiga. I really do, he laughed. I hope Heyman doesn't chase you off like he does some of his other wives.
Let's worry about that bridge when we come to it, Oichi giggled.
Speaking of that, we're here. The luxury home was massive. Sitting like an ancient castle, the building was 3 stories tall and very rustic looking, but also possessing a modern allure that allowed one to appreciate the aesthetic of the design. It had a stone finish around the base that complemented the fine wood structure with large glass windows and panes that flashed the setting sun repeatedly, giving the house a beautiful aura of mysticism. The large gate that blocked their way opened after a moment, and as Mason drove closer, Oichi could see even better the gorgeous structure of the house. This was really the home of a fool like Heyman. It didn't seem possible, or fair. A scattered number of trees and bushes littered the yard that surrounded the estate, and the soft grass was like a lake that threatened to swallow the area itself. When Mason parked, Oichi stepped out and allowed him to lead her to the building. There was an armed guard in front of the door, glaring daggers at them. She the new fiancé? The guard asked. This is Oichi Taiga. Is Heyman in? Mason asked. Pool, the guard grunted, pointing his thumb over his shoulder.
A pool?
Oichi cried. She'd often wanted to visit a home with a pool. You'll see when we get inside. Mason grumbled, and still looking rather dissatisfied. He led her inside, and as Oichi looked around, her breath caught in her throat. The inside of the house was enormous, with rugs, wall ornaments, and mirrors to reflect the owner's grandness. A series of fancy couches and fluffy cushions filled the den, and branched off from that, dawned with pillars to mark the passage, was a large kitchen and dining room. A grand staircase led up to the upper floors, where she could see a balcony overlooking the den on the 2nd and 3rd levels. Beyond were massive windows peering out into the ever-darkening sky, revealing an enormous patio with a massive pool stretched out with an embracing corner as if to wrap around the back of the house entirely. There were 3 men sitting by the glass doors out of the pool, 2 of which were black, 1 was white. They were poorly dressed and were slouched over like CJ. Nothing more than hoodlums. And outside, resting in the circular jacuzzi on the far side of the larger pool, as bubbles popped and water frothed around his body, was a rather round man. He had long, wet hair that fell down just near to his shoulders. He had a large stomach and a slight scar just under his ear. He also had on nothing but underwear as he reclined in the hot water. He was breathing relaxed as his chest heaved up and down. "Boss!" Mason shouted as he walked out towards the pool, with Oichi right behind him. Heyman glanced up, one eye open in disinterest. "Mason? I thought you went to the airport," he grunted. "I did. And you were going to meet us back at the garage," Mason argued. "Is that what we agreed on?" Heyman shrugged. "Guess I forgot," Mason snarled, but said nothing. He quickly tempered himself and stepped aside to reveal Oichi. "In either case, this is Oichi Taiga," Mason announced. Heyman opened both eyes and looked at Oichi over, a small smile growing on his round face. "Ooh, you're prettier than I thought you'd be," he noted. "Come all the way from Japan, right?"
Yes, sir,
Oichi replied respectfully. "There's no need to be formal. We'll be married pretty soon, right? How about, on Thursday?" "But, sir, that's 3 days away," Mason gasped. "It's good to know you can count days, Mason," Heyman growled. "Now shut up."
No, it is fine. Thursday will be fine, Oichi replied, smiling. I can hardly wait for the ceremony.
And I can hardly wait to have you in bed. Heyman licked his lips like a predator, looking over Oichi's body as if sizing her up. You any good in the sack, dollface?
I'm a virgin, so I wouldn't know.
Oichi answered hotly, covering the amount of frustration she was feeling. Ooh, nothing like your first time, Heyman said. Well, I'd be happy to teach you the way to do it. Boss, with all due respect, Mason spoke up, blushing and trying to take the subject back on track. This is highly inappropriate. Don't forget, Oichi is marrying you to help fix our organization. Fix what? Heyman asked. Oh, right. You were saying something about that, right? Yeah, just the other day. Well, I'll just be honest with you, Mason. I don't need your help. Or hers. He stretched and rested his hand behind his hair, leaning his head back. Frankly, I'm happy with how things are. We're alive, we're happy, and we're still in business. I don't need advice or assistance in leading my organization. But boss, Mason, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it, Heyman barked. My dad and uncle might have enjoyed your guidance, but I'm not as dumb as those old farts. Heyman! Mason shouted, standing up and marching closer. Your father and uncle are both great men. Why would you say that about them? Uncle Anthony was a complete dumbass and died for it. Dad cut me off because he just couldn't understand my interests and lifestyle. We're not living in the 50s anymore. You old-fashioned types seriously need to get with the times. With each passing word, Oichi's opinion of Heyman grew worse and worse. But her smile never faltered. She would manage the smile for as long as she needed to. Don't you agree, Ouchie? Heyman asked.
It is Oichi, sir.
Whatever. You seriously need a different name, though. How about Olivia or something?
I'll go with whatever you want.
Oichi smiled, giving a polite bow. Oh, I like the bow. I like that. Keep that. So oriental. Heyman laughed. All right. Well, go show her around, Mason. Ceremony's on Thursday. Let's say 2 o'clock. Make sure she gets something nice to wear. Mason said nothing, but took Oichi by the arm and led her away. Oichi didn't speak until they were inside again and out of earshot. The warmer interior seemed to relax Mason somewhat. I am so sorry for his behavior. Maybe, you know what, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. I can arrange for it.
No, it's all right, Mason.
Oichi answered, brushing her hair aside. But he's making you out to be a trophy wife, changing your name, making you bow like that. Are you really just going to smile and accept that for the rest of your life? He asked.
Of course not. I don't accept it even now, Oichi answered, but I will endure it for the time being. It is a necessary pain I shall bear to see that this organization is saved.
You heard him out there. He doesn't want your help, and he won't accept it. I was afraid of this, but it seems he really does only see you as some new sex toy. Mason apologized, but his tone alone, Oichi touched his shoulder and smiled encouragingly.
Don't worry, my friend, Oichi chuckled. This is all a good thing. Meeting Heyman and getting a peek into your operations, knowing just how bad things are. This is all very good.
But how? Mason asked.
Because now I see the root of your organization's problems. And after I'm married to that pig, I'll begin fixing things.
Okay, well, how are you going to convince Heyman to work with you? It's hopeless. Look, maybe it'd be better for you to return home.
No, I will not leave here in disgrace, Oichi hissed back. I will handle Heyman.
How? She walked past him a moment and looked around until she found a wine glass. Heyman noticed and then went over to grab a bottle of wine, an excellent vintage, and began to pour the glass a generous sample. As he did, Oichi stared at the glass, hungrily.
Do you know there is a weapon more dangerous to a gang leader than a gun or a knife?
What, poison? Heyman asked.
No. It's a weapon that even high school children know how to use, and we will use it against Heyman. Trust me, Mason. Heyman's days on top are numbered.
Oichi walked past Mason and towards the kitchen.
Now where's the bread? I could go for a sandwich with this wine.
Mason watched this mysterious woman and felt a shiver run down his spine. What was she planning? What kind of woman had he just brought to his boss? He admired her, and yet feared her. There was a cunning to her, a ruthlessness. Oichi Taiga was a woman not to be underestimated, and he feared, or rather he hoped, that Heyman would make the mistake of underestimating this tigress among wolves. A new age for this group was coming, and this woman would be at the front of it.
All right, and that was Chapter 2. All right, well, what did you guys think of Shogun of Crime? Let me know in the comments real quick. while I get a drink. All right, well, that was a lot of fun. I'll go ahead and take that down. Yep, it is about time we wrap up. So thank you guys so much for coming on and joining me. This was a great reading stream. I look forward to doing it again on Monday. Going to be a lot of fun. I really love doing these, guys. I really do. I'm very excited to keep doing them. And now that we've gotten a real taste of Shogun of Crime and gotten through chapters 1 and 2, I look forward to reading more. Right now, there are a total of 20 chapters of Shogun of Crime, and I hope you guys will stick around to hear all of them. Anyway, so with all that said, tomorrow I will be gaming with Havoc in the evening, which will be fun, and I'll be releasing a video hopefully that day too. So, excuse me, sorry. Anyway, I think that'll about wrap it up. Thank you guys so much, and as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.